Thank you. Minister, you said before that you prefer to look at the science of these things. Do you support the science of the United Nations panel in their report last year from October that says that we are in a state of climate emergency worldwide, and that statement has been backed up by the United Kingdom Parliament, the Irish Parliament, 532 local councils worldwide, and the ACT government?
Well, Chair, we've had this debate at some length in Parliament already, and I am clearly on the record, as is on behalf of the government, and I have stated, and I've stated in my forward as well to Climate Action 21, that I recognise that climate change is a serious and urgent issue. We have had this debate, and I would have thought that we would want to move to new questions and not be repetitive. I don't think it's sensible for us as members of Parliament to be using the term emergency. We have a difference of opinion on that. I appreciate that, Dr Woodruff, but I prefer not to use that language. And I made that pretty clear throughout the debate. There will be people that think that it's okay to use that terminology. I prefer not to raise that alarmist language, but to recognise that it's serious and urgent, and that we should act, and that we are acting and implementing our strategic plan in Climate Action 21.
Nonetheless, that is the advice of the International Panel on Climate Change, that we have to increase our language in response to the increasing threat from climate change. So,
well, on that aspect, I suppose I disagree.
Can I finish the question? Your government has a plan to reduce emissions in Tasmania that runs out in 2 years' time. You've got a State Climate Change Act which is well overdue for being reviewed. You've got overall net targets which are the real sectoral increases in emissions are being hidden by the fact that the Green Labor government successfully stopped the clear felling of forests, and we've had a massive growth in carbon sequestration in this state thanks to retaining our forests and not logging them as they were being done in the manner that they were being done. So we are hiding our target, our emissions dramatically, and we can be doing more, and we ought to be doing more. So, Minister, when are you going to bring to Parliament the State Climate Change Act?
Well, you just said that the Act isn't being reviewed. It is, and we do.
But it's overdue for coming to Parliament.
Order. You know the rules, Dr Woodruff.
It's well late.
I could say that it is being reviewed. It will be dealt with this term.
This term?
Well,
when?
I can't specify a date. I know Dr Woodruff would like to, down to the last minute.
Well, if it's an urgent issue, it's an urgent issue. So wouldn't you like,
Dr Woodruff,
to actually get it done?
Dr Woodruff, this is going to be a really slow, arduous process if you don't wait for me to finish. It will be this year.
Oh, you said this term. This year's much shorter.
I've just said this year.
Okay, good.
After conferring and confirming that I had it on the list for this year, you'll appreciate that I have a lot of legislation. In fact, I think I have 70% of the legislation that goes through our House.
None of which is as important
so I was just
as dealing with this globally urgent threatening issue to Tasmania.
Order.
I was just confirming, Chair, that it was on my list so that I wasn't misleading the committee in any way, shape or form. It will be this year. The member mentions that the plan ends. I said in my summary that the plan takes us through to 2021 and the funding attached is at that point. It is not unusual in budgets that occurs. In fact, when Ms O'Connor was in government, she even had in the budget 2012 to 13, budget paper number 2, the Tasmanian Framework for Action on Climate Change was superseded in 2011 to 2012 by Tasmania's Action Plan to Reduce Emissions. It's not unusual to introduce a different plan once one expires and new funding is attached to it. So to suggest that the plan ends, yes, that particular plan will end. There will then be a further plan that the government will have been working on prior to the expiration of Climate Change 21, and it will be dealt with in the usual budget process.
Minister, will the next Climate 21 plan and will the State Climate Change Act, when it comes to Parliament this year, will they both contain sectoral level targets, and will there be a target to reduce liquid fuel emissions?
There will be targets in the Act. As I said, there will be that update tabled this year, and I think members can wait until they see that bill.
No, we can't. That's why I'm asking the question now. Will they have
Mr.
sector
Tucker,
level emission targets?
Thank you, Chair.
There's a
The Minister is obviously dying to answer this question and to be honest with Tasmania
Can I
about
just explain
this.
to Dr Woodruff, because she hasn't had the advantage of being in government, and so there is
You
a
are so
process.
sneering.
No, there's a process to go through.
Patronising, I think, is the word.
No, and that wasn't meant as patronising at all. There is a process that we have to go through in government that you don't breach, and things
No, come
like
on, that
bills
involves talking
go
to all
through-
the stakeholders who
Dr.
know nothing
Woodruff,
about
let me
sector-wide
inform
targets.
the
We
committee.
have to have
Order,
them in
order,
order to actually
order.
pull down our
Dr.
emissions.
Woodruff, order. Minister, order. Let me inform the committee that if you're not a substantive member of the committee, I have, and I do name you for constantly interjecting, then of course we can lose, we then have to go through the process thereafter, and that will mean that you may be asked to leave the committee for anything up to 2 hours. So if members in general continually interject, then I have no option but to go down that path. And so please keep everything in order, ask questions and allow the minister to answer, and then we'll go through this process fairly smoothly.
Okay.
And I will just move on through the question. So,
Okay,
to finish off,
okay,
Minister.
Chair. So with respect to the Climate Change State Action Act and the independent review that was carried out in relation to that Act and its operation every 4 years. So the review made 5 recommendations. Firstly, to set a new aspirational longer-term emission reduction target of zero net emissions by 2050. Second, consolidate the objects of the Act. Third, amend the Act to require Tasmanian government agencies to consider the target, objects and principles of the Act when making relevant decisions. 4, include a set of principles to give greater effect to the target and objects of the Act and provide a set of expectations for government decision making. And 5, make a climate change action plan a statutory requirement. The government supports the recommendations, noting that
They're
recommendations
not going to
3...
do anything. Aspirations are a bit like
Noting-
saying,
Or
I'm not
Dr.
going...
Woodruff,
No,
what did I just
I'm
say?
attempting to tell Dr. Woodruff what she can expect to see in this, because that was the question I was asked. And given that additional consultation and analysis is required to determine the best approach for their implementation, so that was 3 out of the 5. A draft amendment bill will be released for consultation before the proposed amendments come before the Tasmanian Parliament, which, as I've said, will be this year.
Okay. Mr.
Yeah.